Good evening, brothers and sisters. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's so glad to have you that you have tuned in again to Insight. This is, I believe, it's our 19th episode. And so we're thankful to God for another day. Insight is a program designed to give information, and we have the voices of various generations, and we have voices of people in different fields, because that's the purpose of the word insight. They will give us insightful information that will not only assist us, but help those in our communities. So again, we welcome you, as we always have, to be a part of this wonderful situation that has been blessed. My guest tonight, now let me just say this about my guest. She was very much inspirational and encouraged me when I first talked about it, and she was very encouraging about it as it relates to. So whatever you see that has gone on in Insight, she is the one that is responsible. And that is Sister Doriel Larrier, who comes from the Salem Baptist Church in Brooklyn, where the Reverend Dr. James Thornton is the pastor. And there's so many things we're going to cover tonight. First of all, she's a wellness advocate, but she is an educator. And so being a wellness advocate also is an education in the particular field that concerns how we eat and the well-being of our health. So we're glad to have her on tonight. Sister Larry, it's good to see you.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. If I may, this is how I greet my audience. Dumela, Sawubona, Sakpase, Namaste, Elshin, Dubraota, Assalamu alaikum, Hotep, Buenos dias, bonjour, and good day. What's going on?
Hotep. Now, what's the first word mean? So at least that we know that we're not getting cussed out. What's the first word?
No.
No, I know, I'm only playing.
No, so I greet my audience like that because I see.
Yeah.
Those.
You there? I think we froze up. There you go.
Oh.
Yeah, it's all right. It froze on this end, but I can see you now.
Okay, sorry. So anyway, I just like to take words of greetings from different places that I've been to and incorporate them into my welcome.
Miss Larrier is a well-traveled person. She has two very intelligent sons, and certainly they are her heartstring, but they are developing into very nice young men, and I commend her certainly on her motherhood as it pertains to that. And do not be fooled by her calming voice and big smile. She probably had to raise her sons in a way in which a voice that we have not heard. Okay, so with all of that being said, explain to all of us, Miss Larrier, what is or what isn't a wholesome advocate? Go right ahead.
When you brought up this topic, I initially thought, were you trying to say wellness advocate? But then I rethought the word and I said, well, let's work with the word wholesome.
Okay.
We usually focus on ourselves in one or two levels. We see ourselves definitely as a physical being, and then most of us in here are in a spiritual space. So then we see ourselves on on a spiritual plane. But then there's another part of us that is emotional, that is intellectual, and so forth. And so sometimes we don't think about the other parts of ourselves or the other aspects of our lives. So as an advocate, if we use the term wholesome advocate, I want to look
We'll do wellness. We're going to do what you do.
That's fine. Because you made that other distinction, I'm just going to interchange it.
Absolutely.
wholesome wellness. Actually, wholesome is more encompassing than just wellness. So, and I'm not the be all and end all. I just have an insight, all pun intended, because we're talking about insights. I have just paid attention to a number of things that some people have either ignored or said, I'm going to worry about that later. And unfortunately, either later comes and people are in for a big surprise, or later does not come because they don't see it. So why don't we just sort of pay attention to certain things now?
Ms. Larrier, about 2, maybe 3 years ago, taught in our Nation Development Hour at the Bethlehem Nation. And of course, it's Sunday school, but we don't say Sunday school. We certainly rebrand, but it still comes down to the same thing. And she was very, very, very exceptional. And so we're familiar with, at least those from Bethlehem Nation, we're familiar. And I know there are people from Salem Baptist Church are watching. There are people from her various things that she do in the social media. And so with Doriel Larrier, there is God, there is Africa, there is love, you know, various things. So
Big words and karaoke.
in the karaoke, yeah. I wasn't going to ask where'd you get that from, but I guess it's the fun part in you. Let me ask you this. When we talk about this pandemic, because we've all had to live, I don't like to use the word differently, but we all had to adjust. So considering this pandemic, what are the concerns of the human body? Because, and the reason why I asked that question is because we're inside most of the time. And by being inside, if you're not careful in terms of reading or studying or resting, we could have a lot of things that consume our body. So, what are the concerns that we put on our bodies in reference to this time?
So most people in my community know that I and my family, we endured it as well. So mid-March, came home, thought I just had a cold, then I thought it was the flu, and then I had other symptoms that when I contacted medical professionals, they said, oh, you got it. And I actually did Facebook Lives about this because since I wanted to go to the hospital because I felt so bad and didn't really know what was going on. And they said, oh, you don't have any pre-existing conditions, so you have to stay home. I had to definitely just sort of suffer through it myself. So I have 2 sons. My oldest son did not display any symptoms. My younger son did as well. So literally everything that you heard of in the streets, on the news, we had every single symptom. So I live with it and from it with a different lens. During that time, most people just tried to figure out what to do again if they couldn't go to the hospital. I had a number of people in my wellness community who heard what happened and they just literally made like a train line to my house and dropped off this, dropped off that, dropped off this, said, make sure you have this. Here's some stuff that's like, you know, on the serious market. And, you know, I took it all. And there were things that I did that I'm accustomed to. And I literally had to, quote unquote, go back to the old time way. And it wasn't very complicated. And so when people said, hey, boost up on your vitamin C, I didn't just double time, I quadruple timed with some other things that, you know, I talk about I have like a Facebook group and we talk about wellness, and I've done that for about 3 years. Most people who know me, they see me juicing, they see me up at 5:30 in the morning, you know, doing work. And so a number of people have said, you probably did not suffer so much because you already use certain protocols and certain products that work. So yes, I was hit hard, and it was I would not wish the feeling on anybody. But thank God I did come through it. And still, again, it wasn't anything new. It was things protocols that I used before. So one thing that I want people to be focused on is, and this is something that I say at the end of every broadcast that I do pertaining to wellness, I say, be intentional with everything that you nibble and sip. And I'll say this again, pay attention to the impact and live accordingly, invest in the best and leave the rest alone, be informed, read your labels, and inspire somebody else to do the same. The thing that's really impactful here is the word impact, and that's pay attention to the impact and live accordingly. So everybody eats things that they love to eat. But when you eat things and then you feel whatever a kind of way, shift one thing at a time, eat something different that your mama told you, your daddy told you, your grandpa, your grandma told you, your doctors tell you all the time. But then shift and choose something else that you know is probably better, and then see how you feel. Literally pay attention to the impact. And if it makes you feel better, add it to your protocol.
I think that's very important, because I think, not everyone, but sometimes in the Christian faith, we live off the words that says, well, God will take care of us, which means I can eat anything I want. But everything that God made was good, but then some scientists and other people got a hold of it and added some things to it. So that's not always the case. So I've seen your program where you're actually doing the juicing. Now, tell us what you juice and how it's good for you.
So that's a longer story, which right
All right.
now I will drop in. And if I can drop in the chat, and then you guys can make it public when you'd like, is 1 second. Okay. So I dropped in a bit.ly link, and it's bit.ly/claws squad. Claws like the claw on a bear, CLAWSE. So for those teachers out there, it's a pun, right? And then squad. I juice those things that are supposed to be juiced. Now, literally, this is like an entire class. I juice those things that are supposed to be juiced. I also do the best to juice within seasons. Certain fruits are best and vegetables are better in different seasons. We live in New York. We're here in New York, but I know that I have people who are in South Africa watching right now, or who are going to be watching.
Right now, okay.
In the seasons. We're the only living beings that eat across seasons, not realizing that certain things are better at different times of the year. For example, we're in New York. We can't, and one of my favorite fruits is watermelon. We can say that safely here, right? Yeah. So I love watermelon, but I know I can't really get it best in the fall and the winter in New York. It's better in the summertime. It's a type of a seasonal fruit that is better at a particular time of the year. Apples, you can kind of get apples all year round and they're fine, but there are just other fruits and vegetables that are just better at different times of the year. So people will usually see me juice during the summer and like spring, summer, and early fall. I usually always have some form of root vegetables of carrot and celery, and then, some apples, what have you. In the wintertime, I do more ginger because it heats up the body. And so, of course, if you have ginger in the summer, you could heat up the body, which will then make you perspire and then, cool off your body. But if you have it in the wintertime, then it heats up the body and you can kind of contain heat. So there's like a definite science, and there's a book list that I'll share at the end that can lead people if they are interested in some of the books that are on my top shelf. Oh, thank you very much. Books that are on my top shelf. And thank you so much. Wow, that's great. books that are on my top shelf that are my go-to, but I've actually spent a lot of time with these books, so I don't have to go to them very often. There are just things that are like stuck in my head, but they're also stuck in my head according to how I feel, what time of the year it is, what time of the month it is, what time of the week it is. Certain things that I'll do on the weekends, I won't do during the week because I'm running heavy thither and yon. And given the type of things that I'll juice, or if I make smoothies, or if I'm making salads, I know honestly I just have to sort of stay put and be calm and relaxed than running around. So it's a loaded question.
But it is. Let me return to the watermelon for 1 second. I remember going to China, and watermelon is not grown in China. They import it there. Now, you correct me on this. Watermelon, I feel, I don't know if it's the only fruit, but it is the fruit that I've experienced that can fill you up digestively and quench your thirst at the same time. Would you say that?
It is. So there's people who are, I'll say, in the wellness community. So the fruit that has the highest water content is coconut, then watermelon. Below that, then you have the other melons like cantaloupe and honeydew. So you're getting filled up with, really, if you juice watermelon, there's very little pulp left because it's 95% water.
Yes.
So it fills you up because it fills your stomach up with a liquid. Because if you had water, it would fill you up. But the difference between water and watermelon juice is that there's the natural sugars. So the natural sugars will kind of, fill you up as well. Again, there's very little pulp. And then you get that sort of sugar rush. And yeah, you'll be filled up. And then, of course, like the next hour and a half, depending on how much you eat, you release. But if I can say, so I say in my class squad, there is no TMI, there's only FYI. A number of people will focus on, will just tell me the cute and proper stuff, but the grit and grimy stuff I don't want to talk about. But then you wind up sitting in your doctor's office and they're dealing with the grit and grime when you can actually address it before it has to get to grit and grime in your kitchen. What do you want? Most people will just deal with it later, and then dealing with it later is very painful, literally.
My guest tonight is Miss Doriel Larrier. Again, we're going to put a Cash App up there for those. And as I've said every week, now there's not a particular amount, but be a blessing to her. Certainly, we're learning a lot tonight. I think it's important for our health, and she really has all the information that she needs to, and adding some more. So we are thankful to her, and I'm thankful for her pastor for allowing her to be on this. Now, so can I get back to juicing for one moment?
Sure.
I know we talked about fruit. What about vegetables?
So vegetables, the same thing. So for example, right now we're in the fall, sort of like in the middle of the fall. We're going to go into winter really soon. One thing I love to have during the fall and in the winter time is actually root vegetables. I love juicing them, and then I love roasting them when I'm going to eat something that's heavy and I want something starchy and that's going to like fill me up and kind of be very warm. Most vegetables, and even certain things that you don't think you can juice. My favorite go-tos, most people will think their favorite go-tos are like, carrots and celery. Some people were on like the celery juice kick for a couple of months ago, what have you. I'm a blend kind of person. And so again, depending on how I'm feeling, I'm in tune with my body and the cycles that my body goes through at times of the year, weeks, months, what have you. And so I juice according to how I feel and how I want to feel and how I need to feel. Certain things that people will not juice, that they're like, you can juice that? So I actually did a video on juicing romaine lettuce, and people were like, wait a
Oh,
minute, I just saw you eat that. Well, you can, but you can juice it as well. People will juice spinach. Some people, if you have a good juicer, but you need a particular type of juicer to kind of do those kind of things. But, leafy vegetables, fine. I like peppery things. So I like arugula and watercress and parsley, but those are peppery. And so you have to be ready for that type of a taste in your juice. But then there are vegetables that are better to for the most part, you can juice it.
okay.
That's just a short answer. But
No,
again,
that's a very effective answer. Thank you so
I
much.
cover a lot of this in my group, Facebook groups.
Now, you know various things as it pertains to this. Now, what is a vegan? What pertains to a vegan? What's I mean, I know, but you can break it down. What is a vegan?
Sure. Had I thought about this, I would have had my chart up here and drew some pictures, but we can do it here. So there are many different times of, and I guess I'll call them eating patterns, or I don't really want to say diet because diet has a punitive, restrictive intonation. So I'll just say, eating choice. You have people, let's say, who are meat eaters, carnivores. And then there's herbivores, which then goes into people who choose to eat without eating live flesh. From from a carnivore, you have different types of, how can I say it? People who choose to eat different flesh and therefore have different terms. So someone, let's say, who's a pescatarian will eat flesh that comes from the sea. So those are fish eaters, right? If you remove fish, then there are people who eat fowl, chicken and turkey. You remove that, and then you get to like the level of vegetarianism. So vegetarianism is a person who eats foods that are not directly part of animals, but you could have a vegetarian who is lacto-ovo. So lacto means that you still consume dairy products like milk, cheese. Ovo means that you still consume eggs. When you remove that, then you have your vegetarians who, some people are starchitarians.
Yeah.
So those people will consume like a lot of potatoes and rice and what have you. All well and good. Again, pay attention to the impact and live accordingly. If you remove foods that are cooked, then you are considered raw. So vegans could be raw, or they could be, I guess, processed vegans. Processed vegans, people who eat like, let's say, like the what we call like the vegan junk food, right? Anything that, let's say maybe soy related or that like the vegan chips, what have you. But then you have some people who, and in a community that I was raised in, like if you go to the sophomore, junior level is your raw, like 80-20. 80% of the food that you eat is raw, 20% could be cooked, which could include like steamed food, steamed vegetables. Or maybe something that has like wheat in it. There's just so many varieties, even within the vegan world. But a strict vegan is someone that does not have any flesh. They don't have any animal or animal byproducts. Byproducts, again, like cheese, milk, eggs, etc.
And with all of that, you still recommend exercise?
Short answer, yes.
Because, one can eat differently, or wellness. or eat well and not exercise.
Mhm.
So would you say the exercise should, and I know this, the area we're talking about is basically a wellness advocate, but would you also not, would you encourage people not to stop exercising or for people to continue with exercise?
So I think I'll only give myself as an example. And people who have followed me on my Clause Squad or follow me on my personal page on Facebook or even on Instagram, especially during the summer, again, we were in the shutdown, but in the summer, I was like waking up at like 6 o'clock in the morning because it was beautiful out and it was light. And I was taking like my walks and trying to get these 10,000 steps a day in. My goodness, I didn't know how long I had to walk to get to 10,000 steps in. But my doctor's like, you need to start getting 10,000. When I heard that, I said, do you know I drive everywhere? Where am I going to get 10,000? Like, what are you talking about? But then during the winter last year, I said, listen, I'm just feeling a little sluggish. Let me sort of figure out what I could do. Now it was dark at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. So I was not walking around in my neighborhood at the time of the morning. But I said, well, what do I have? And I live in an apartment building, and I just walked up and I ran up and down the steps. And I was like, I have to get my stamina up. So I eat well, but I felt like very sluggish. And so I said, if I only have steps, I'm gonna take the steps. And so now that we have like more cameras in the building, I'm sure people are like, what is she doing? It's 5:30 in the morning. But I'm trying to use what I have.
I understand. Ms. Larrier, of course, we said, and we'll segue to that in a moment. Salem Baptist Church. I'm sure Jennifer Jones Austin is watching you.
Oh,
And
hopefully.
if she is, hi Jennifer, going to get you on here too at some point if you're watching. If you missed this, then you have to catch up with somebody has to quote me and said what I said. But I
Catch
just
the replay.
right. Now, what are the things that people should guard as it relates to diet? Or you talked about certain things not eating, but in terms of what should they guard against? I mean, we know junk food. We understand.
Right. I'll repeat something and then add to it. Pay attention to the impact and live accordingly.
Okay.
Now, most of us are aware that there are animals that exist that feed their young with the material that is produced through their body.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That material can get digested by that animal because it is for that animal in its natural state. Most of us would not go up to another mammal and put our child to suck from that animal. But we have an entire industry that has one animal's byproduct, and it is feeding the whole world. It doesn't happen vice versa. So the focus on that is there are things that we consume that are inflammatory.
Yeah.
If you did not hear the disclaimer in the beginning, am I a nutritionist? Absolutely not. Do I have a doctor behind my name? Well, not right now. Sure. But and that's for males or females, when they go to the doctor and the doctor says, so you have some cysts or you have some fibroids or some mass that is growing like that. If you ask them another question, they're going to say that there are hormones that are continuously expanding, which then expands that mass. If you ask the next question and you say, how can I reduce this? Well, where are these hormones coming from? The hormones are coming not from human byproduct. It's coming from an animal byproduct. Women are told, in order to reduce fibroids, the first thing that you should swap out of what you consume is dairy products. Women that I have been raised with, and we've gone through cleanses, we've gone through, what some may call like fasting cycles or what have you, or we've just swapped out that which we have consumed for something else. And men do it too. They see a change in how their body feels. A number of people have said, hey, you know what? I'm going to choose to go from whole milk to maybe soy milk. But now we're finding out things about soy milk, that there are other things attributed to that. Or they'll go to almond milk or cashew milk or some other sort of a nut milk. Why? There is inflammation that builds up. That's a whole conversation, and it's controversial for a lot of people. But in the end, if you go to your physician and you say, hey, why is this thing continuing to grow? What you eat is either going to add or it's going to take away from that which continues to be in your body. And I say this very, very, on very few occasions, unless you were born with a condition that's straight out of the womb, your body, those switches, right? Those switches that are part of your genetic code say that this is the probability of what could happen. Whatever you put into your body is either going to add to that to cause it to grow, or it's going to like swipe away so that something else happens. People don't stand, and I say this, I'm not being funny, but people don't stand on the side of the road and have like a condition or a manifestation because they're standing on the side of the road. But over time, if they're putting things into their system, again, it's either adding or it's taking away. The same thing that we say about, at the beginning of the conversation, we're talking about wholeness. The same way that we in the Christian church, we say, what's the song? Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking, be careful what you put into your eye sockets, because it's going to add or it's going to take away from that which you become. What do you hear? It's going to add or take away from that which you will become. What you consume, everything that you consume, it's going to add or it's going to take away from that which you become. If people think about that, and so I've lived for a number of years as a vegan, and let me just say I eat a little bit of fish now. Let me just say that. But when I did, and people said, well, how do you feel? And this is, a couple of years ago, I said, I only need 5 hours of sleep, and I'm running like a rabbit. I'm just running. I feel very light. I feel very energetic. And when I put certain things back into my system, I'm like, boy, I need a nap in the afternoon. Or pay attention to the impact and live accordingly. So we can go into a different topic. I can talk about this all day long.
Yeah, you sound like a disciple of Dr. Sebi.
Did you see that? I was reading something about him before we got on. Did you see that? He's actually one of my, he's on my book list. He's on my book list.
I understand that Dr. Sebi was where Magic Johnson went to Africa when he was diagnosed with AIDS. and he went there. Dr. Sebi helped to heal him. And the next thing you know, we know Dr. Sebi dies, because now it's like moving toward, well, if Dr. Sebi is going to recommend this and talking about what the body is going through this and what our body can recommend if we allow it, or what can hurt our body, that the whole pharmaceutical thing, of course, you know this better than I do, is the biggest drug dealer that there ever was. I mean, people, all over the world will say, well, how could you do this? How could you do that? But the pharmaceutical companies basically have that. And Dr. Sebi was saying that's not even necessary. And he dies mysteriously. But anyway.
Like I said, that's controversial.
That's controversial, yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this. We talked about watermelon. You talked about coconut juice. We know that those are the things that are relevant to drink. Water with lemon or water with cucumbers?
Okay, so I'll focus on the water with lemon. So 5:30 in the morning, I'm up with a group of people in my class squad, and we are consuming what has been called a number of different names. Actually, I was just in a conversation earlier today with someone that said, oh, if a famous person does it, then it becomes the famous person's name master cleanse, or the other famous person's name master cleanse. I'm like, okay. So lemon water, excellent, start your day with it, drink it during the day. It's great, right? That's the simple thing. So one thing that I start my day with, of course, is lemon water, and I put a couple of other things in it, but the lemon is so amazing because, and again, I'm giving you the tea here, so there's no TMI, there's only
The
FYI.
tea, yeah.
The specialty. So lemon is amazing because it's literally, once your feet hit the floor, and this is what I say in my group, once your feet hit the floor, so, and I'll say it like this: slide past your hydrotherapy room, figure out what that is, slide into your healing laboratory, and have your room temperature water. Some people may want to heat it up a little bit. Room temperature water, fresh squeezed lemon juice, and consume it. If you have, especially if you haven't like brushed your teeth yet, and you take it down, whatever you had the night before, you're going to actually feel like a little, I guess the best word to say is like a little tumbling in your throat, because the lemon actually, and this is where I got the term claws from, it literally strips, it pulls any matter that was still in your mouth, in your throat. And so you wind up doing like this, or because it literally is like scraping off whatever is there. It's amazing. And so starting your day, then it does the same thing to your esophagus, to your stomach lining. Of course, those people who have, what's the thing that you have? Not acid reflux. What do you have when you can't take certain acidic foods? It's just in my head.
They call that.
It'll come to me. But those people who cannot take a lot of acid, then of course, you don't do that. But at least start your day with some water, just to get your system moving, to get the things that have been stagnant during the latency period while you were sleeping, get it moving. Okay. You do like 8 ounces, 10, 12. I do about 16 ounces to start my day. About an hour and a half later, that's when you're actually going to start to feel like you can take the first bite of something, but give your system a chance to slowly wake up.
I like that. That's great. Now, I want to ask you this, because we're going to shift now, because as I said, Ms. Doriel Larrier is an educator, and at the college level. Because generally when people say you're a teacher, they think you're teaching children, which is not a bad thing, but that's not what she is. Now, you went to what school, Miss Larrier?
I am a proud camel. I will say that again. I'm a proud camel. I am a graduate of, my undergrad is Connecticut College in New London, Connecticut. Okay. Go Camels.
And your master's degree is?
I have 2 master's degrees
Two.
from,
Oh,
thank you. I do. I have 2
yeah,
master's degrees.
I'm proud.
Thank you very much. From Brooklyn College, right in my backyard. And one is in, master's in education, and another one is in master's in education administration.
Very good. So now we shift to education.
Sure.
As it was announced, I think, today,
Let me get my
that
pencil.
the New York City schools will be closing again.
So can I tell you that
Yes.
I did not know that?
Okay.
Unfortunately,
you're allowed. Just because
right.
you're an educated, you're allowed not to know.
I would know. I was at anyway are remote. So I am remote.
Okay. Okay. You're remote. Okay. So now, give me your, because you've talked to me about it.
Right. We've had conversations.
Right. Speak to this audience about reading and where it is not right now in our society.
So shall I talk about it and I'll use the term pre-Rona, or just in general? Pre-March?
Pre-Rona, and move on up the road if you like. That's fine.
Sure. So as a community, reading is not one of the top 3 priorities in our families across the board. It is not.
Why is that?
I'm trying to.
Now, and the reason why I asked you why is that, look, reading, I know the importance of reading, but reading just happens to be a hobby of mine. I love reading.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my mother had an 8th grade education, but she was a
Mm.
ferocious reader, kept books in the house. So why is it not a priority in our community?
Right.
They used to say that if somebody's going to break in your house, whatever money you have, you put it in the book because,
Right. Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. But now maybe they're gonna go and look in the books. No. Thank you, Malcolm, because we all know is Malcolm and Stephen.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it isn't a priority in a number of our households now. And let me just speak from, let's say, 1990 on, because of the increase of the use of technology. So there are a lot of like book clubs that are still going on with adults that are just like, I cannot put this paper down. Like I need to hold on to like a book. I need paper. But with the increase of technology, and we've gone to like the ebooks and the Kindles, and now everything is right here, like everything is in real time. And so people are shying away from sitting down, quote unquote, with a good book. And if we don't do that for our children, then our children are just like, well, everything that I really need to know, why do I need to spend 3 hours reading a book? I can just get the Crip Notes, or what was that word? What's the Cliff Notes, excuse me, from YouTube, or, from the computer. How that is driving a wedge in the intellectual stimulation of our communities, it's really hard. It's really hard. And so let me, though, say this. Shout out to the hip hop generation. Shout out to the hip hop generation who has taken politics, who has taken social justice conversations, where, let's say, my generation, or I'm really part of the beginning of that, but prior to me, our education, if it didn't come directly from the text, it came from the text of poets. It came from the texts of musicians. It came from the text of like, social justice, like we're going to
Well,
march
you're
for.
talking about Nikki Giovanni and the Last Poets and
Right, right.
Tony Sanchez and yeah.
Yes. And so it came from those people. And if books were not available, and depending on what echelon you are on, if you chose to take your children to the library, if you chose to have that library card, and that was a big deal, then great. If you chose to participate in reading communities within your child's school, whether it's, elementary, middle school, and high school, what have you. But realistically, once a child is like in middle school, what have you, they really don't want to, they'll read because they have to read, but they won't necessarily read because of the love of reading. Because now it's like, oh, here's a piece of technology. And it's like, oh, well, I could do that instead of picking up a book to read. Well, why would you do that? So here's where I literally just finished this book. And actually, I happen to have this book right in front of me. So I'm going to show it to you. So it's called The Tiger Rising. It's by Katie Camillo. I literally just finished this book yesterday with my students. So during the day, for those of you who don't know, I teach fourth graders. At night, I teach on the college level. So I literally just finished this text, and most of my students will say, and this happens in most communities, all right, fine, I'll read it. And they could really go through the book in maybe about 2 hours. It's a short book. But the interpretation is so powerful that you have to pay attention to small details. And so when people get into a conversation about, well, what did you really think? What is the symbolism? How do you make connections to what happens in real life? And most people are like, what are you talking about? Same thing with movies. I'm the person, if you've ever been to the movies with me, you already know this. You'll probably be like, oh my gosh, here she goes. I talk during the movies. Every little thing that happens, I'm like, did you see that? What does that mean? And people are like, Doriel, be quiet. No, that's really important. And when I leave a movie, I need to literally sit on the side of the road and I need to say, I got to talk about this. And they're just like, it's a movie. No, people do not spend millions of dollars on a movie just so people are watching and go on about their business. The same thing with books. Books are supposed to provoke conversations. They're supposed to provoke, exchange and making comparisons, looking at contrasts. And so when our children, like my students, if they're not modeled by their families about picking up something and then discussing it and pulling it apart and looking for the symbols, then when they get out in the world, they have these superficial conversations and it's like, oh, you could be a little bit more deeper than that. Or they miss the opportunities for critical thinking. So
But is it,
reading, of course,
we talk about children, but you have adults that don't read.
Well,
I mean, the thing is that, and this is not demeaning anyone, you can always tell if a person does not read. It's not because they use big words. It's the flow of the conversation. At least that you probably know more than me what it is. But for me, it's the flow of the conversation. Mm-hmm. They don't have to use large words that show me that you went to a tremendous university. Okay. But just by the way they talk, because when they speak with reason in every conversation. Right. So if we're talking about the children not reading, now we're talking about adults not reading. Right. And what we've come down to is to quote Martin Luther King, but don't read about Martin Luther King. Right. Right. So as an educator, that's quite a challenge. How does that make you feel, though?
Right. So it pains me, and this is literally an entire DVD, as one of my colleagues would say. It's an entire DVD or an entire mood. When I engage with other people about whatever's going on, there are times that I'll reference a text, or there are times that I'll reference, like maybe a movie or a sermon or a lecture or a presentation that I've attended. And most people are like, you just too, like, why you gotta go there? Like, it's just there are other levels, there are other layers. And so
Yeah.
I often feel like maybe I'm just the only one. But, then I just find another group. And then I find a group who thinks like that. And I flow with them. And then we go for hours. Like we go for hours, like it's a tennis match. But what did someone's like, what did Sonia Sanchez say about that? Or, the King and what is it? King and Malcolm X.
Last poets. I mean,
Right, last
You'll
poet.
start Heron.
You'll
By the way, Doriel Larrier
Marvin Gaye.
is a very, she gets along with all communities, but she's very Afrocentric or African centered, socially conscious. So she's all of that, and yet is able to maintain that smile with all people. And she has relationships with a lot of people. You really have, and yet not lose that core of who you are.
I thank you.
I think that's really amazing. Because sometimes when we cross over, we cross all the way over. Anyway, let me just say this.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not insulting you. I think that you're able to blend in with, well, not blending. You're able to converse with so many people in different backgrounds effectively, and still not use lose yourself of who you are and how you think.
Got it.
Where there are sometimes our people, I mean, someone told my wife some years ago that people don't respect nobody with money. Now, there are a lot of people that don't have no money, but that doesn't make them less than. They may not have the money like you have it, Doriel Larrier. They may not have the millions of dollars that you have, but they are not less than. But I also now you correct me. You're an educator. There are so many people that I have met that have gone to great schools and have degrees, but are not intelligent. They went to get the paper.
They missed it somewhere.
They got the paper. They wrote those papers.
They had
did their dissertation.
They had somebody write those papers for them.
Yeah, but what they wrote and what they read doesn't live in them now. They just went through let me get this paper out the way. All right? Anyway, okay. I'm not going to have Ms. Larrier to get into anything controversial. As an educator, what is the fundamental things that you are in danger moving toward the future? The fundamental things that could be education, social issues, health. But let's stay with education. What are the just the fundamental things? Because whenever somebody says to me, Dr. Kemp, and I tell them, I don't have a doctorate degree, I have a well-earned undergrad. I earned that one.
Wait, just repeat the question again. I think it was a little.
What are the fundamental in terms of education? What is the fundamental things that? Let me put on my glasses because sometimes, like you, I can't see. The fundamental things that are in danger moving forward in terms of education. What are the fundamental things?
Wow. So this is a perfect example. I'll say interpretation, critical analysis, and making connections.
Okay.
Interpretation, critical analysis, and making connections. I remember being in middle school, and I have to say, and I know my middle school history teacher is not listening, but the only thing I remember from middle school, 7th grade and 8th grade social studies, the only word I remember is Bolsheviks. That's the only word I remember, because the only thing that we were told to do was to copy what's on the board. Just copy wow. Every day. Copy what's on the board. And there wasn't any connection there wasn't any critical analysis. And so I felt by the time that I got into high school, which was a number of the same thing, copy what's on the board.
Right.
Not until I got to, not until I got to college did I sit in my history classes and I just was looking like this. Because I was looking at my peers who were engaging in conversation about things that I knew I was supposed to have learned, but
Mm.
nobody engaged me in critical analysis. And so I remember coming home from college and going, back to my nuclear community, my church specifically, and saying, before these young people leave to go to college, we have got to engage them in critical analysis. Because if they show up on that college step like I did, just being listeners, just taking information in, but all the other students around me were like, yeah, and proletariats and socialism and versus communism and blah blah. And I'm like, what? And so as a teacher, I actually try to engage people in critical analysis, no matter how young you are. Because as parents, and I'm going to speak as a parent, we get our children home off the bus, we give them a snack, we give them dinner, we may read them a story, we get their homework and we put them in bed. They're not actually engaged in critical analysis or analytical thought unless you have some teachers who are going to take some time and dig deep into the symbolism and whatever. And so if parents don't understand that that's part of some people's curricula, then the get out the room, this is grown for a conversation.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Well, I remember that. Yeah.
And right, and the teacher is saying, what are your thoughts? Tell me what you think. And realistically, the child's like, what? Nobody asks me what I think. They just say, get your food, put the plate in the sink, get your bath, go to bed. So we have a long journey in terms of trying to meet people where they are. But I will say that's in our community. Very few of us start even at a young age engaging young children in critical thought. Other communities, though, do that. And so you have this, and we've talked about this before, like wearing a mask, right? County Cullen, we wear the mask, the warring souls. I got to be one person at home. I got to be another person at school. So just something to consider.
I have two more questions to ask you.
Sure.
Then we're going to conclude. I want to ask you, considering this inauguration, Joe Biden won, and of course the inauguration will take place in January. I just saw a documentary on Ronald Reagan the other night. People forget that Reaganism still overlapped, it still exists. And what I did not know, I knew Reagan believed in states' rights, where if the states decide they're going to hang 10 Black people a week, the government would say, well, that's the state. You have people in place to do that, so we don't have to bother with that. So with Biden winning, and I know a lot of us, a lot of our people in our community celebrated. There were hallelujahs all over the place. But with Joe Biden, and this is nothing against Joe, I like Joe Biden winning because he was loyal to Barack Obama. But in all of this hallelujahs all over the place, will it change? Does it really change the trajectory of the politics in this country? Because I already know you're just thinking about how to say it.
So if we go back to when Obama was elected and people thought, oh, great, now we have a Black man in the House, and so all of the problems will be solved. Everybody is going to, go and have a good slice of and let me throw a pun in, some sweet potato pie instead of apple pie. However you take that pun, no problem. But I am now proud of those people who said, just
Yes.
because we have a Black man in the house doesn't mean that all the problems or issues of Black people will be solved. Let us still hold his feet to the fire, of course, and, make sure that he's accountable, make sure that he's going to address issue G, F, D, and C, whatever that is.
Whatever that is.
Right, whatever that is. Now, I was part of the group that said, "Oh my goodness, like great, yeah." And then I was like, "Well, what? Why aren't you, adulating? Like, why aren't you like so excited?" It's just like, "Oh, I'm okay," but he's still a politician. He's still, you know, uh, elected by a group of people that have an agenda. And so now that I look back, years forward, I'm like, wow, okay, there were certain things that people question, like, well, how come he didn't do this, didn't do that? I'm still amazed and thankful and blessed that he was elected. But it took years for me to say, oh, wait a minute. There were things that, let's say he said he was going to do and he didn't do. And how does it really impact the entire global compass? And I was like, wow, I didn't know. So, but again, this goes back to my middle school and high school education that wasn't critical, that didn't have critical analysis. People in my family, we didn't talk politics. We didn't. We just didn't. We didn't talk politics. It wasn't what we talked about around the table. There were other communities that did. So again, when I went to college, I was like, what are you talking about? So now that with the Biden-Harris era, am I thankful that we've turned from red back to blue? Great. There are other things though that happened, years ago in his early tenure that to some Black people, they're like, okay, just so you know, he had this issue that we were dealing with. There were things that, occurred. And so I'm like, all right, well, now I know more. Now I can analyze more and I can sort of question more and say, okay, hey, this may be a blanket statement that he's giving or one thing that he's doing, but what are the other things that are beneath that? Let's say, you could sell, what is it? Okay, in essence, you can give me the tip of the iceberg and the tip of the iceberg looks good, but what's all the stuff underneath that I may not be able to see that I may actually have to suffer as a result of? So I know more. I participate in local politics more. I'm engaged with my local officials more. And so I could ask more questions and then make better decisions about whoever it is in the office and, encourage other people that I know to ask better questions.
Now, this is a favorite segment for a lot of people who watch this, and particularly for those in the Bethlehem congregation. What books would you recommend for people to read?
So is this pertaining to wellness or is this pertaining to like advocacy?
Okay, now, well, how about it pertaining to
wellness?
All right, here we go. How about it pertaining to education? How about that?
Oh, I didn't prepare that. Okay, but I didn't. I was so focused on
the reason why, when you talked about critical analysis, right?
Sure.
I learned critical thinking from my mother with an 8th grade education, in which in junior high school, she says, pick up a newspaper. Right? I came home. She says, okay, so tell me what you read. The problem was I didn't read it. I didn't read it. Then she says, tomorrow when you go to school, pick up a newspaper and explain the article you read. To come home, explain it. That's where I first learned critical analysis. Third day, she says, pick up a New York Times. Don't pick up the Daily News and Post. She said. So in that regard, you brought about how that changed. Now, Ms. Doriel Larrier, we have 2 things that are going on. Of course, one, we know that Raphael Warnock won the Senate in Georgia. We have the borough president, Eric Adams, who has announced his candidacy for mayor. He's going to have to come on here. I would love for him to come on here, but you know.
If you're watching this, Borough President, I'd like to have you on my show as well.
Yeah, you can go on.
Back to that conversation.
Mr. Borough President, you can go on her show first, ladies first. And please have your staff to contact me so I can have you on. I want to thank you, Ms. Doriel Larrier, for certainly your insightful is really an understatement, even though that's the name of this show. You gave such rich information, well thought, as to our future as we eat, we take care of ourselves, and as we look at the system of education, and for all of us, what is your closing words to people that you want to deliver for everyone that's watching?
Wow.
Or to, you know, encourage in any way.
Right. So I have two things that I end with when I'm dealing with health and wellness. I say this at the end of all of my broadcasts. I usually say, this is a learn to grow you moment where I plant seeds to help you grow. I want you to eat to live and drink to live. Don't live to eat and don't live to drink, but let your food be your medicine. Be intentional with every single thing that you nibble and sip, and that which you put into any part of your body. Pay attention to the impact and live accordingly. Invest in the best, and this has to do with food or information, and leave the rest alone. Be informed. Read your labels. Don't sign up for anything that you didn't read about.
Okay.
And inspire somebody else to do the same.
Freezing.
To discuss their good things. And so I want to encourage people that make sure that you take your information and your intention and move yourself and other people around you into a positive direction.
Let me ask you this, and I know we're really going to go, but how did God play an important part? I know you're a believer in Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, who has delivered us and continues to cover us. How has the Lord Jesus Christ played a part in your life throughout this whole process that you have been through?
In the last 9 months or the last such and such decades?
Well, if it's such and such decades, I guess that doesn't have to be asked. You pretty much answered that one. But there also were journeys, and each journey
Sure,
had their own challenges.
Sure.
So that's my question.
Sure. So I'll give the Reader's Digest version.
The Reader's Digest version.
Reader's Digest. Shout out to my Uncle Andrew, who always says that the Reader's Digest version. To say that God is good is, of course, it's an understatement. I can say it now as someone who is past or about the halfway mark of life, and I now feel like the elders in my church when they spoke, and I was little and said, "Well, what does that mean? God is good. God is good." Now I'm one of them. Right now I'm one of them. His presence in my life has allowed me to not look through my own lens, but to look through his lens.
Absolutely.
I still make my own decisions, and then I get sat down when he says, "I just need to remind you, I'm in control. You have your own plans, but guess what? I got better ones." So it's daily. It's a daily walk. It's a daily journey of, what do I want to do? And then what does he want me to do? And then, of course, the things that he wants me to do are much, much better than what my mind could actually conceive.
Very, very good. I want to thank you so much for really just adhering to the invitation for you to come by. I'm particularly I have a cousin of mine, Tamika Ridley, who wrote a book that's on Amazon called A Rose in a Dark Place. And it is a powerful book. One of my members was telling me about it this past Sunday. And she's tuning in to you. And she said, excellent information from one educator to another.
Oh,
so
thank
I
you.
want to thank you. Now, brothers and sisters, let us not forget Cash App. As you see it flashed across the screen, to be a blessing to Doriel Larrier. Now you look at that picture there with those glasses hanging down. It's almost a picture of Tisha Dixon Weems' book, I See You, Sis, you know, that kind of thing. It's almost like one of those pictures.
But that's my signature moniker.
Yeah,
My
well,
signature moniker is me looking over my glasses. And if anybody
I know
hashtag
that. I know
looking
that.
over my
I
glasses,
remember when you used to, at Bethany Church, when you worked there, it was always like this, you know. Like,
why do you have to go back to Bethany? Shout out to all the people from Bethany Baptist Church.
shout out to all the people from Bethany.
That's right.
Shout out to all the people who followed Doriel Larrier. Shout out to her as it relates to God, Africa, and love. Our guest, there won't be a guest next Wednesday. That's the Wednesday prior to Thanksgiving. But on December the 2nd, we will have as our guest the Reverend Kim Neal from Kim Neal Ministries in Delaware. And so we're looking forward to, I've known Reverend Neal since she was about 5 years of age. And so she's going to be our guest, and you need to hear what she has to say. And even though Ms. Larrier talks about some things in terms of time, and I agree with her, I wanted to be clear in fairness to her. She's younger than I am. So I just wanted that, and I don't say that as a put down. I just want everybody to think that, I don't want you to think on the other side, well, Reverend Kim is older than me, you know, so I just want to make that clear. Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate you.
I want to close out with a word of prayer,
Okay.
and then we'll, leave from there. Eternal God, we thank you for Sister Larrier for being such a enriching help to our minds, to our thoughts, and I pray, Lord, that you would continue to not only bless her life, but to elevate and stretch her life for not only the betterment of the kingdom, but for the betterment of people. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, good night. See you on December the 2nd. We will not be on next Wednesday. That's Thanksgiving Eve. I will not put my staff through that because they all have things to do. God bless you. Be well, and see you in 2 weeks.